All right, we now have joining us on the Soccer Hour. It is Heath Pearce, who will be on the call Saturday night when the San Jose Earthquakes play host to Sporting Kansas City to kick off the 2026 campaign. Heath, what's going on, man? How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Doing all right. It's good to see you wearing a beanie. We're in like peak California winter season,
Yes.
so bundled up.
Maybe here's the most important question. You're about to start working with Mark Rogandino, for the fourth season. Are you sick of him yet?
I'm not. I actually stay fresh with Rogo when he posts all of his throwbacks to when he got into the industry 20 plus years ago, and he
Yeah.
had spiked hair and bleach tips and interesting choice of attire. And so those are the things that keep me invigorated to continue to work with him. His vulnerability, I'll call it.
That's fair. That's fair. No, you guys obviously get out to the San Jose games a lot, and so it's fun. We get to see you in person, and we're looking forward to doing so on Saturday once again. But this has been a very interesting offseason for the San Jose Earthquakes. Christian Espinosa leaves in a weird fashion after his option wasn't picked up. They signed Chicho Arango, but then he decides that he has personal stuff going on, wants to go back to his home country. They decide not to re-up Joseph Martinez. They do sign Timo Werner from Germany, but he's not ready to play yet. So as you enter this season, 30,000-foot view on the Earthquakes, what are you looking at with this team?
Well, I think the first thing you call out is obviously getting Nico's deal over the line as a U22 in terms of his cap hit. I think the quality that he brings. I think it's a if you're close to the club, it's a good signal of intent of where you're looking into the future. Obviously, Timo Werner, I think, will be a long-term addition that will contribute and do big things for the club. But obviously, you're losing a lot of that offensive weaponry that you had in years past, and even in a year like last year where the team doesn't reach its overall team goals, you still had that offensive threat all year long. I think on the defensive side is hopefully where you see them in the marketplace looking to solidify. When you look at Bruno Wilson, when you look at Rodriguez, that leaves the club. These are players that I think had a lot of potential, but somehow wasn't able to all come together. And so I think that's an opportunity for the future. But when you look at just sort of the activity in the marketplace for the Earthquakes during the offseason, going into the season, still a lot to be desired in terms of I think meeting probably what the expectations of the fans are in terms of results by the end of the year. But you look at this first match of the season, and you take preseason results aside because I think those are solid. They give you an indicator. There's
Yeah.
rotation and all those types of things. When you're playing against Sporting Kansas City, it's an opportunity very early on at home to get a result. And while you can't take too much stock into it, and I'm sure Bruce Arena will say we're building, it's going to be a process and all of those things. I think it's a really pivotal moment to be able to come out of that first match with 3 points, knowing that you are building, but taking some things along the way.
You mentioned Nico Chakiris, and one of the things that I've identified with him in the last year of his play, whether it was with the U20s or with the Earthquakes, is that his physicality finally caught up to his skill, especially on the ball. And I know that's a hard thing for viewers, fans, etc. to do, because when he comes in and has his first play for the Earthquakes, it's a cold Philadelphia night in March of 2022. That's a 16-year-old kid. And I know that we can talk about young kids in global football that do and are ready at that point. But what I saw from Nico last year was that the physicality was there. He was faster than he'd ever been. He was stronger on the ball. He was able to handle the defensive pressure. Does that track with what maybe you saw in the evolution of Nico last year? Because to me, it just looked like a very, very different player than what we had seen previously.
Yeah, I think you look at it through two lenses, right? When you're a fan, you're generally focused on results, right? And what's the team doing for me right now? And so Chakiris, I think at times has gone through those growing pains where you see the potential, you see flashes, and you go, when does that start to shape into a product that maybe has the potential for larger impact over 90 minutes? And then you look at, again, those potential things that he had and has. And I think you're spot on in the trajectory that he's on. You're seeing a physicality and a comfort and a confidence that you're not dealing with a boy with potential anymore. You're dealing with a player that's got a few years of experience. They're knocking on the door of potentially getting looks with the national team, building that consistency. And then you see some of that potential start to get shaped into what I think is going to be a really, really important player for Major League Soccer, and I think at some point for the U.S. men's national team. And so this is a window, and seeing a new contract like that for a club that has a lot of talent within the pipeline of the academy, I think it signals where the club is trying to go. And for a player like him, hopefully it means more consistent minutes, the ability to learn on the go, and I think he's at a point now where giving him extended minutes doesn't have to feel like you're sacrificing potential results in the short term, because I think he's ready to be a leader. I think he's ready to be a starter in this team, and ready to really continue to grow. And that's going to come through his own work rate, but it's also going to come in the club's willingness to invest in those minutes that are going to help to shape him for the future.
Last year, with the three players they had up front consistently, Martinez, Arango, and Espinosa, it was a very offensively aggressive team, which scored a lot of goals, but often put them in a vulnerable position, backtracking, getting caught out in transition, a lot of 1v1 emergency defending. Do you think the team adapts to I don't know if less aggressive is a proper term, but maybe picks their spots a little bit more this year to be that much more defensively minded? I know we can only take away so much from preseason, but it did look to me like there was more of an emphasis on having guys ready to defend the transition as opposed to what we saw last year.
Yeah, I think for sure. I think there's going to be an addressing of the ball in a more formal way against the ball, right? Transitional moments, defensive setups, your blocks, the trade-off of the fact that I think there was maybe a bet going around the league of saying there's just no possible way that the San Jose Earthquakes can roll out all of their offensive players in a single game. And they did it pretty consistently, right? And they were able to produce in a lot of ways, but there is a true trade-off. Yes, we know that Espinosa is willing to do the work on both sides of the ball, but there is a trade-off when you're chasing goals of the type of game that you're going to play, the buy-in of the defensive structure. And I think looking at 2026, there'll be a much more of I wouldn't say conservative setup, but more of defensive principles in terms of transitional moments, against the ball, defensive shape. How do you build a foundation of results that you might not have the amount of same goal output? You hope that Timo Werner is going to get you those goals, but if you don't, can you keep yourselves in matches? Can you stay off of giving up goals on the defensive end? Can you defend better in the box? All of those types of things that I think hurt the Earthquakes last year.
Yeah, last year we saw a big step forward from Daniel Muni in his third year with the team and in the league since being drafted out of Indiana. And the Earthquakes have also used many of their other draft picks on those defensive positions. We saw it with Max Floriani, Reed Roberts, most recently Jack Jasinski out of Princeton. I'm curious, in your mind, the college game often gets I don't know if overlooked is the right term, but a lot of the more common pathway now is the academy system. But the fact that Bruce Arena is willing to give those minutes to those young or relatively inexperienced players along the back line, what does that say about Bruce and his ability to make those players work in Major League Soccer quickly in their careers?
Yeah, I think there's a different type of maturity of the player that's coming out at 22, 21 years old out of college, and the way that their maturity levels, yes, they're lacking maybe some of those crucial professional environment development levels that maybe a 17 or an 18-year-old will have that's spent their whole life in the same academy coming up. But you get a different type of presence and maturity in terms of feedback and response and an ability to learn. I think there is a trade-off in all of that, but one thing you have to give Bruce Arena credit for is obviously his ability to find those players throughout his coaching career, right? If you go back to the Galaxy, yes, you have the Landon Donovans and the David Beckhams, but you also have the Omar Gonzalez's and players that I think he built around them that came through the colleges. And yes, they weren't 22, 23 years old, but an AJ De La Garza and other players that come through the collegiate system that are able to be pivotal in playing a role for the team that helps create long-term results, create competition for positions, and not, again, always having to maybe play a young player where along the way you're going to have to maybe sacrifice results or give up goals because those players need to learn through playing time.
With Sporting Kansas City, this is a team that's finally moving away from Peter Vermees, and this is the type of situation, the most convenient reference I would have is like when the Patriots moved on from Bill Belichick. You just had a coach and an executive who was such the franchise forever, and now they find themselves with a new system. They're in the post-Peter Vermees era. How hard is it to move out of that shadow? And I don't say that in a negative. It's just that Peter was that franchise for so long, and now they're finally in a new era.
Yeah, I think it's really hard. I think with success comes the demand from the fan base, from the club. And I think we were rounding a corner into a new generation that it was the right time. And, I had a number of conversations with Kerry Zavagnin last year who had mentioned that, with regard to his role with the club moving forward as a club legend and an interim of like, well, first you got to start on the sporting level, right? What is the
Mm-hmm.
DNA of the club moving forward, right? What's the academy that we're building? What's the style of play? What are the principles and all of those things? And obviously the club did a great job of bringing in David Lee, which I think is a great starting point because now you've got a foundation. You're separating a little bit of church and state in terms of roles and responsibilities, creating accountability within the club moving forward. And then you can go out and find a coach that can start to implement a system, right? Because coaches come and go, but the club itself needs to have a philosophy, a DNA, a style of play, and all those things that I think are woven into the youth all the way into the first team. And so I think they're taking the right steps. But these projects, when you come in, you inherit a number of players. Yes, we've seen 12, 13 players of turnover from last season for
Mm-hmm.
Sporting Kansas City. But now you've got to go and find the right pieces because what you don't want to do is sign a bunch of players to multi-year deals, and then you're kind of stuck with hoping for the best. And I think being that you bring in a general manager first, who then brings in the coach, I think the steps they're taking to do it the right way to not just try to win in 2026, but actually look at a club that was so competitive for a decade plus in terms
Mm-hmm.
of not just playoffs, but challenging and being a very difficult place to play, a very difficult team to beat, coming with trophies. I think that process will be seen in the future that maybe in the short term feels a little bit painful as you start to build out a roster through the lens of having a system that's driven by club first over coach.
You said a lot of interesting things there, but there was one in particular that I was thinking about after you said it, and you talked about identifying what the identity is. And I often feel like New York with Red Bulls, they have that figured out. And I think Philadelphia does as well in terms of the academy to the first team. Are those two the prime examples? I know there's been success, obviously, with Dallas as another one, but are those the two examples that have figured it out the most of how to translate that academy to first team success?
Yeah, and I think that's why when you look at Red Bull, there's a reason you can build a coach from Red Bull 2 into your first team in the way that they have with Michael Bradley, right? They have a
Mhm.
system in place and they go, okay, who is able to implement that system, right? And who's able to buy into the way that the Red Bull way? And you look at Philadelphia and the fact that they move on from Curtin. That's a big thing, right? He was successful for the club, and maybe he didn't take them to the point that they wanted to, but there was a moment where they're like, okay, there's a maybe a divide between um, the way Jim Curtin wants to play and the players that he wants to implement, and what our philosophy in the club is in terms of youth academy and the way that we're implementing into the first team and the way that we're building a sustainable football club from a financial side and those types of pieces. I think
Mhm.
start with again building that DNA. So those are great examples. I think Columbus is another one. Maybe not so much academy driven, but just in terms of like if you were to ask most people, how does Columbus play? What is the style? What are they trying to do? I think you'd find some consistency there as well. So, although some markets won't have the same maybe commitment or depth in their academy, there's still at the club level of who is the Philadelphia Union, who are the New York Red Bulls. I
Mhm.
think you get a pretty consistent response as to what it is they're trying to accomplish, and whether they have the right coach in place or the right sporting director. You still feel it goes beyond any one single person that I think helps to create accountability or a measurement that may not just be in wins and losses, but may be in alignment of where the club is going into the future.
If you could also expound upon what you said there about the separation of church and state as it went to the front office of Sporting, because I think I know what you mean, but I just want to hear more of your thoughts on that, because I think that hits on something that not everybody wants to look at.
Yeah, I think a lot of coaches, and Bruce Arena as an example, right, has multiple roles within the San Jose Earthquakes, and that I think has the ability to be really successful when you have a single source of power that has, I would say, a single source of power. That's maybe the wrong way to put it,
Hmm.
but has a hand in decisions that are sporting related, and not just the product that's on the field, from budget management to who your scouts are, building your staff, and building those types of things. When you have somebody with the experience of Bruce Arena, you would hope that you would get him to lean in on those types of things. But in Sporting Kansas City, you had Peter Vermees, again, had multiple roles within the club, that over time, when the results don't kind of go in the favor that you want, you look and you say, well, that's an area where you hope to have a sporting director, or your technical directors, your general managers, and then your actual technical staff on the field. That should be a committee. And at times, it can feel there can be a strain, whether that's in the locker room in terms of power struggles of who has final say on player signings, who is building the philosophy of the way in which you want to play. And so I think that separation is generally healthiest when there's multiple roles.
Hmm.
But at the same time, looking through the lens of a coach, you come in, you say, well, for me to be successful, I need to be able to have some power in terms of who we're going after, the type of player and the profiles. And so there needs to be that healthy tension. And I've personally believe that the more you can separate out those roles, the more you can divide the responsibilities, right? Because it's not just like a GM and a head coach anymore, right? You've got a data team, you've got a
Yeah.
scouting team, you've got a technical team, you've got a medical team, you've got budgets, you've got a lot to deal with in a modern club now, and you need large resources to compete at the highest level in Major League Soccer, right? They are investing in infrastructure across the board and headcount. And so you need to have single sources of accountability and responsibility in certain roles. And then more than anything, it's very hard for a single person to be able to manage that much and do it at a high level. You can do it maybe in isolation, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but it becomes far easier to measure the more that you can invest in the infrastructure of a club with roles that are single sources of responsibility or accountability in certain areas that measure success as a team.
Two-part question for you. Why will it work for the San Jose Earthquakes in 2026? Why will it not work for the Earthquakes in 2026?
Okay, good ones. I'll start with why it works. Bruce Arena has been successful everywhere he's gone, right? He's taken a lot of broken, maybe disorganized, maybe under-resourced franchises and been able to turn them around and find success. So I think on that alone, you can never rule out Bruce Arena and his ability to deliver for the club. You've got a deep academy where if you can find how you balance, and goes back to a little bit of the Philadelphia Union, right? Balance
Mhm.
short-term success, which is how you drive butts and seats. That's how you drive sponsorship. That's how you drive awareness. That's how you drive hype. And then 3-5 year planning of like, what are we looking like? And the players that we're investing millions into our academies, how are we making sure that those players find a way into our first team, the ones that are ready, right? You don't have to give any gifts to that. And then to answer your second question, so I think that's the part of how you'll measure success, both in Bruce Arena being successful because he's always been successful, right? So that's going to be points that you put up in the season, having a clear identity in the way that you want to play, and being able to get results at home and away this year. The academy is the part two to that. So, can they get to a point where your players are ready to contribute in a consistent way, not just towards player development, but towards results? And then on the other side, where it could not be successful, is everybody's spending.
Mm.
There is a new era in Major League Soccer where, Major League Soccer teams are outspending most leagues in the world in terms of player acquisitions, or most leagues in the world in terms of player acquisitions, incoming acquisitions, also the ability to sell players now at market value. And so the ability to assemble a roster in time that you're maybe not going too far into the summer where now you need every single point on the back end of the year. I think it's great in terms of the turnover on the defensive side because clearly that was an issue. Regardless of what I saw was actually a lot of potential on the defensive side last year with some of the bigger names. You gave up some of that firepower on the offensive end. Can you put those pieces together with what you currently have, add a few pieces up the spine of the team that I think allow them to be not just knocking on the door for playoffs, but be competitive in the playoffs. And so that could be what I think are the shortcomings for the San Jose Earthquakes. And that's the same for Sporting Kansas City and a number of teams who haven't been as active as you would hope. Again, that's the beauty of going into 27 and starting with the summer calendar, is you would hope at a certain point budgets align with the global calendar, allows you to build budgets and execute and manage budgets in a way that allow you to build rosters against the global sort of system, that I think it allows you to start a season stronger than maybe trying to buffer your squad with players that are out of contract or available for acquisition, or transfer in the summer window. So long-winded, but those are the two areas that I would say are going to be at least in my eyes early on, the definitions of success and failure for the club this year.
No, not long-winded at all, man. I'm loving all this. And as a final one for you, what are the deciding factor or factors in this game coming up Saturday night?
Well, it's like I mentioned at the top of our conversation, take all that aside, it doesn't really matter. The season's starting, right? You take away preseason results, player departures, incoming players, what Timo Werner is going to be over a full season. You've got a chance at home in your first game of the season. And there's nothing better for players in a locker room who maybe feel like we're not quite there yet, or a coaching staff that says, hey, we've got most of the pieces, but not all of them, than to go and get results as a team collectively, right? When you look at last season, near the top of the league in terms of goals against, can you keep the scoreline tight, right? Can you grind out a small result? And I know that was the story of San Jose for a few years pre-Bruce Arena, of like, we're just waiting for just that one result, that one grind of a result where we're going to turn the corner. But I do think, the passion and the heart and the soul of this team is already in place, and you got to now go and grind those results. So if you can do that at home in your first game of the season, I think when you whether it's March or April or however you're building your roster, those are nice to haves that continue to make you stronger, but it doesn't come with the added pressure of points lost early in the season. So you've got a chance against a team that's rebuilding. Very rarely do you get to be a team that's rebuilding, playing against a team that's rebuilding. And at home. So that could be your first 3 points where you go, okay, we got something here. And so I don't think it needs to be more than that, other than kind of disciplined, smart, executing what they've done throughout the preseason in terms of transitional moments, defensive shape, and then having that bravery to take those risks on the offensive end to get yourself a result at home, make the fans happy, and set the season on the right tone.
Heath, great stuff, man. I will let you go. I look forward to see you on Saturday. Bring a jacket. It's going to be a little bit cool. Maybe some rain as well. Probably not as bad as you're going to face in Colorado soon, but it'll be our Bay Area version of weather.
Okay, thanks. Look forward to seeing you.